get to the bag, ayy. Got the foot on the gas, pedal to the metal when the lane moving fast, ayy. Let them all cross. If they hate, then let them hate and make a bigger boss, ayy.
This is This Week in Freight, powered by my friends over at DAT, you guys. And as you know, this is 100% viewer submitted. I just want you guys to send me your lanes. Pickup city, delivery city, trailer type. We do drive-in, reefer, and flatbed, and we break it down. And I just let you guys know what I see as a broker and how I would approach these lanes out there. So this one is reefer, McAllen, Texas to Los Angeles, California. And if I'm going out there and I'm assessing any of the lanes that I'm moving right now for my customers, the first thing I always do, and I've always done, you guys, is I pay attention to that mileage, right? That days of transit. And then specifically when you're moving reefer freight, you guys, in addition with where fuel prices are, you're kind of getting double pinged on it because it's obviously it costs more to fill up the reefer unit as well. So again, we're at 1,600 miles, general rule of thumb. This is 3 days transit. So this picks up Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday. You should be good out there. But again, it's that Thursday to Monday, Friday to Monday lane or day of the week. It's going to potentially add more of a price on there for you guys. So let's look at this here because obviously there's been a spike out here, right? Like if we're looking at the 1 year mark, this lane was moving for $3,900 over the last. It spiked at about 4,800. Up there on the 90-day mark here, but it's since stabilized, right? So if we're looking at March and April, so over 60 days, it was about $100 price variance out there. In March, it was at 4,600 was the average, and then in April it's at 4,500, and it's still sitting around that 4,500 mark about 6 days into the month of May here. So I know personally a lot of my friends who move a lot of freight out of Laredo, McAllen, South Texas, stuff like that. They have said that that area has been disproportionately affected by a lack of capacity out there for, obviously, if you pay attention to the news, you guys, the non-domiciled CDLs, the immigration checkpoints and everything are really stopping to, it's really slowing down capacity into some of those South Texas, South Arizona, regions like that, because a lot of the drivers just don't want to deal with it. Not saying that every driver out there who's running, who could be affected by it is not going to run down there. It's just one of those things where people just don't want the hassle to come along with sending their trucks down there. So, you know, that's going to naturally affect capacity. And I would hope you guys have already talked to your customers about this. But to me, from what I'm seeing right now, it outside of tight capacity, it's seemingly the rates have stabilized, right? And I'm not going to sit here and tell you guys what to quote on any lane out there because I don't want to take any money out of your pockets, but I see stability, at least from a pricing perspective. And if you're working with your customers on that truck in hand style approach to covering this stuff, because again, the day of the week matters. If there is a lack of capacity, you got to communicate that effectively with your customer and let them know, like, hey, this might not be able to ship on that Tuesday that you want, but I got a truck for tomorrow. We can keep the price the same and everything else. And you really got to sell this stuff, you guys, because that's going to be, I think, the big differentiator out here, especially next week with it being Blitz week. It could get pretty dicey out there. And then the thing that I kind of see happening is that tight capacity might roll in through Memorial Day, which is at the end of this month here. So pay attention to this stuff, you guys. But, you know, nonetheless, I'm looking at this from a pricing perspective. Next week, probably going to be exponentially more expensive. This could stay that way throughout the rest of the month of May, but I wouldn't be surprised if this leveled back off, or it could potentially level back off, you know, between Blitz week and Memorial Day. But again, I would pay attention to this. But if I'm seeing this right now, my thing isn't necessarily as much as the rate stabilizing as it is the amount of reports that I hear from people that are moving this specific lane, that McAllen, Laredo, South Texas, capacity is very dicey down there. And we all know that. So you need to be passing that information along to your customers. You guys got to have these crucial conversations, right? You can't just throw a higher price at them without context. So take that for what it's worth, you guys. Specifically, I'm not going to sit here and say that this lane has, I will say it has stabilized, but knowing what's happening next week and the week that could be those few weeks in between Blitz week and Memorial Day, it could get pretty dicey out there, you guys. So again, communication is everything. At the end of the day, keep your customers informed, let them know what's going on, and everything's going to work out for you in the long run. At least the customers that you want to work with, they're going to respect that, and they're going to respect that approach. So that lane, you guys, is McAllen, Texas to Los Angeles, California. It looks stable right now, but knowing what's happening next week and potentially to roll in for the next couple of weeks leading up to Memorial Day, it could get even dicier in a tight capacity market, which is down there in South Texas. But as always, you guys, if you want your lane broken down on the show, email my team, podcast@thefreightcoach.com, and we will break it down for you guys. All we need is pickup city, delivery city, and trailer type. All right, let's get back to the interview. What is up, ladies and gentlemen? We're back. We're going like rogue here because I'm having technical difficulties this morning, and I don't know how long my camera is going to work for. So I at least wanted to get my face on the screen here. And Bryan did the honors of wearing orange with me today. So there's going to be no mistaking what we're going to be talking about here on today's show. And, you know, we're going to be breaking down one of the most, pressing topics to, I think, the industry right now is, you know, obviously our industry has been getting a ton of media attention right now. And we're not here to argue whether it's good or whether it's bad. I'm here to cut through the facts. And, you know, I always enjoy having actual attorneys come on the show to break this down because everybody's a legal scholar on Twitter, but very few people actually can talk the talk out there. And as always, anytime there's an attorney on the show, none of this is going to be legal advice. If you need an attorney, contact an attorney. Bryan's probably not your attorney. If you want Bryan to be your attorney, he probably needs you to contact him and sign a bunch of documents to have that happen. But Bryan, thanks again for joining me today.
Hey, it's great to be back. Thank you for, I guess I didn't screw up royally enough last time I was here, so we can punch through this. I know we're starting a little bit late. We missed the intro, so I don't know where we are time-wise, but I will do my best to make sense of what's going on, identify kind of what are the things that we're looking for, and unfortunately, just a precursor, I don't feel great.
Yeah.
You know, I don't have the warm and fuzzies about how the Supreme Court's going to rule. Yeah. And I think people are maybe looking over here at the shiny object saying, oh, well, if this happens, this is what's going to happen. I actually think there's a whole bunch of other dominoes that will fall behind us that will shape the transportation industry for years and years to come. I mean, how long did it take us, right? In the oral arguments, they talked about, you know, this is a long-standing brokers being liable, both pre-regulation and after regulation. But then they referenced really the specific turning point was a previous C.H. Robinson case, right, in 2004 when the plaintiffs got creative and brought in the broker. So really from 2004 to 2026, you know, 22 years. It took us 22 years to get something before the Supreme Court regarding broker liability. This was our shot. This was the chance. I don't know when it'll come again. And I don't know that there will be any more certainty following this case.
So let's start, like, for me as a broker, Bryan, my biggest thing is where does my liability stop with the carrier selection, right? Because it's like there's only so much information that is at our disposal that we can use to decipher, is this carrier legitimate? Are they safe? Are they ever? And a lot of that comes from the FMCSA data set. Now, there's obviously vetting software that is out here right now. Yep. So it's like if on paper, everything's green, right? Great safety rating, great everything. All of my vetting software says these guys are good, active insurance, all of that. I booked this carrier on a load. Heaven forbid this happens, but there's a fatal accident that happens on there. How and when does my liability stop in that situation? So
we got to kind of move over and identify who's coming at you, right? So in these instances, there are injured individuals. Yeah. These injured individuals go to all of the attorneys out there that have billboards, that have TV commercials, that literally take a shotgun approach and say, hey, we're going to spray everybody involved.
Yeah.
So the second your name is either on a bill of lading, is on a rate confirmation, is on a freight tender, is anywhere associated with this shipment, your liability or potential liability begins, right? And so we're there. In terms of where it stops, I will say it this way. Plaintiffs' attorneys are very similar to improv coaches, right? Yeah. Every time it comes to an end, they go, yes, and?
Yeah.
Yes, and that is what we are facing here is no matter what you do as a broker, right? You could do all the checks. You have all the systems. You go to all the systems are green, right? You pay for all of them. I don't know who's your sponsors and who's not, so I will try to keep my names to myself. I may let one slip here and there, but that's just what happens. But you go through all of these things, and you say, look at all these great things. You go and you high five all your friends as you walk back. I did everything, and then the plaintiff's attorney comes and goes, yeah, but why didn't you do that one other thing, right? If you checked 3 safe stat scores, why didn't you check the 4th? If you checked 5 safe stat scores, but not the out of service percentage, well, why didn't you do that? And bringing it back to the case, right? I feel like the oral arguments did not get to an opportunity to discuss what really do they see, right? The counsel for C.H. Robinson kind of came out and said, hey, listen, it's not practical to do all these things. Now, they didn't say why it's not practical. They said, hey, and I think we were talking about this beforehand. C.H. Robinson, I don't think is the greatest, representative of the brokerage market out there. The same way that most carriers, are under 5 trucks. You don't want somebody that's like, you don't want someone with 1,500 or 2,500 power units speaking for everybody as far as what safety technology they're supposed to have, all those different things. Excuse me. C.H. Robinson is the same way here. Sorry, give me excuse me. I get a little excited and I start coughing.
No, it's all good. And I think what you might be describing here, and I don't want to put words in your mouth, is when large corporations are out there representing the entirety of an industry, it can skew because like they have maybe different resources and different processes. And this was one of those things that I'm like, we can't broad stroke every single operation under the exact same umbrella because everybody operates differently. Everybody's tech capabilities are at a different level. And if the overwhelming majority of the industry doesn't operate in that same manner, it's kind of like pigeonholing everybody into the same kind of box. Is that what you're really describing there?
Correct. Yeah. And take food safety laws. When they made the food safety laws, the sanitary transportation of human and animal food rule, right? They included broker in the definition of shipper. Mm-hmm. That's because the large brokers sometimes have representatives on site at the docks, at the facilities, right? At the warehouses, at the growers. Most brokers have someone in one single office, right? That's it, and a bunch of computer programs. They don't have the people that go out there and are there. And they're like, so when they get designated a shipper under food safety law, they're like, I don't have any control over how it's packed, what it's packed with, what temperature or transportation requirements, in transit requirements there are. Why am I getting lumped with this responsibility? I don't have anything to do with that. And so with this case, C.H. Robinson may not have been the best representative because when they're sitting here going, oh, this is a huge, when I just look at C.H. Robinson, I can see, all their financials, right? I can see that they're a huge company. When most of the people, they talked about how most carriers are small and the FMCSA does not get a chance to review them. Most brokers are small. Mm-hmm. Most brokers don't have that ability. And they touched on it a little bit in the oral argument to say these individuals, they would need to hire safety people because they're not safety experts.
Yeah.
And motor carriers go out and get, consultants. So our broker's going to have to go out and get consultants. But could you imagine you have a Friday night shipment and then all of a sudden now you say, hey, I got this carrier lined up. Hey, I need you to send me. Well, you can't send me their drug and alcohol results because that's confidential. It's protected. Yeah. The FMCSA says, you have to hold that. HIPAA, if there's any type of, medical issues or identification in the documents. And then you have, DQ files. Okay, well, I see a DQ file. Do I need to call? Like, at what point do I need to call the repair facility? Was this repaired? Do I need pictures of proof of repair? And what they talked about in trying to get to the vicarious liability argument is to say, if I do too much, I'm now vicariously liable because I'm controlling someone. If I do too little, I'm now going to be held responsible for ignoring everything. And I think right now what we're looking at here in terms of when does your liability stop, there is a reasonableness standard that has gaps. Is that reasonableness standard going to be it's obviously going to be applied differently state by state based on the way their definition of negligent hiring, negligent entrustment, negligent selection is applied. But is that also going to be what's reasonable based on your size? And if they say, hey, listen, it's not reasonable, if you're this small and it's reasonable not to have all the technology, all the expensive technology, then small carriers are going to be somewhat insulated.
Yeah.
Well, then small brokers are going to be insulated, and the large brokers are going to go, that's not fair. That they're free from liability, but I'm not. And they're going to look at that and say, well, isn't that how carriers work, right? Small carriers, if there's a large cargo claim, right, they just close down and walk away.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas the big carriers are there and they go through the fights of cargo claims. So I think there's so much uncertainty, and let me just, I guess, kind of take one step back and say, I do not believe, based on the questioning, based on the intent, based on the responsiveness and back and forth of the Supreme Court justices, I do not believe this goes in favor of the broker.
Okay. So I guess, like, if say it doesn't, what is going to fundamentally change here, Bryan? Because, like, again, I can't, you were mentioning HIPAA and, a lot of the internal documentation of these carriers. I can't request that, right? Like, at what point, like, what stops, or hold on, let me rephrase this. And sorry, guys, my camera died. I'm human. All right. So Bryan and I are just you guys all know what I look like. I look at it like this, because it's like, what if you were bringing up the attorney was like, oh, you should have checked it. What if we check all of the mark? We can document, we prove it, we have it all. And then it turns out that this carrier hired a driver, maybe overlooked some stuff. That driver happened to be on the load. And by the time they hired him and had him driving for them, everything wasn't updated properly. What about that gray area? And again, this might be like a rare instance, so it's very hard to quantify that. But like, that's where I go with a lot of this stuff, because when I see a lot of this, it seemingly, and I'm, I've already called out mainstream media on this show enough about this stuff on the reporting on these specific cases, is it's like, to me, it's making every single broker look like we don't pay attention to anything, and we're just slapping any carrier on the load. And then these guys are blaming the brokers. And again, like I've mentioned before, I have to mention this again. There is a very clear difference between negligent hiring and overlooking things for a profit, and what I feel most brokers do out there is we're beholden to a data set that is provided by the FMCSA. And if the FMCSA says these guys are good and we book them on the load, and it turns out that carrier isn't who they say they are, and something happens, like I see a lot, brokers get drug in, shippers get drug into this stuff. And seemingly these carriers, just like there's chameleon brokers, I'll say it, these carriers are reincarnating overnight, and then they're still operating out there, right? And I want people, there's another very highly publicized crash case that happened in Colorado a few years ago, where an untrained driver, brakes went out, missed a bunch of runoffs in Colorado, hit and killed, and there's a traffic backup at the bottom of the mountain, ran into it, killed like 8 people on there. That carrier was operating the next day under a different identity. So it's like, when all of this stuff is going on, and then again, we're using that data that's out there, Bryan, how many brokers book that carrier the next day or the next week or the next month? It's like, oh, these guys are clean, everything's good, they got active insurance, and then not knowing that happened out there.
So I'm gonna take a tip from the movie's Utopia, right? When he goes out to the for anyone who hasn't seen it, right? Nick Wilde goes out to take questions, and sorry, Judy Hopps goes out to take questions, and Nick Wilde's like, well, just rephrase the question to what you want to answer and answer it. So I will be, let me answer, let me say it this way first. What happens if you do get all the information? So let's just say that information is accurate. You flipped it and said, hey, if it's not, let's assume that information is accurate and you get it. You're not a safety expert.
Mm-hmm.
You're not someone who's been trained in reviewing these files. The Supreme Court essentially said there's no way the FMCSA can do it. So they've punted. all indications say that they're punting towards, well, yeah, the industry needs to kind of police itself, which comes down to brokers. And you had mentioned shippers as well. Well, shippers, what happens if they get this information, right? They're going to say, and this is where the plaintiff's counsel comes in and says, well, you knew who showed up at your door. There's nothing stopping you from going and looking, shipper. You know, even if the broker looked at it, you could have stopped this at any point.
Yeah.
You have the relationship. You at any point could have said, hey, broker, don't no, I'm turning this guy away. And so by having all that information, if you get a DQ file, what happens if the DQ file isn't complete? If the court comes out and says, well, you need to look at the vehicle maintenance records, what happens if the vehicle maintenance record is not complete, but you don't know, are you familiar with all of the hundreds and thousands of sections of carrier safety? I don't memorize them all. I know where to look and I know how to look them up, and I'm very familiar with what it covers generally and what it doesn't. But if you're going to tell me that I'm an attorney, this is what I do every day. If now all of a sudden every brokerage needs a safety analyst, think about all the automation that we're going to.
Yeah.
What's going to be the point of automation if now we have to swing the other way? And so let me now get to your question about if they put somebody else on the road. That goes to a reasonableness standard, right? So were we negligent if they put somebody else as opposed to what we have? Well, it depends, right? Is it reasonable that we need to check when they show up at the facility? Are we having to check the driver name? Are we having to check the VIN that it matches who they told us and who we have records on?
Yeah.
And how often do we need to check? Well, what happens if it gets common where someone just picks up in that area and then interchanges it or interlines it to somebody else, and someone else takes that sealed trailer the rest of the way? If we don't know about it, the question is whether how much of a duty. So negligence claims, just so you know, there's 4 elements. It's duty, breach, causation, and damages. The Supreme Court focused on that third part about causation. Where does causation end? Right. So how far is it the driver only? And then counsel had to tell them, well, the driver is a statutory employee, whether they're independent contractors or employees of the motor carrier, and that's why there's never a negligent selection argument against the carrier. They're vicariously liable. They're liable. It goes to the causation. Well, we didn't drive the truck. We didn't do any of that. We, as a broker, we didn't put them in the seats, because they kept saying, well, you put the driver in the seat. No, we hired the trucking company. They brought their own driver. And so if they put somebody else in there, well, if we have an indication, going back to the first element, duty, breach, causation, damages, it depends how broad the scope of our duty is. Does our duty end at the initial setup?
Yeah.
Maybe. Does the duty end when they pick up? Maybe. And then how often do we need to refresh and reanalyze that information? So if someone next week posts, a different broker says, hey, listen, I hired this carrier and some other driver showed up based on the records. Well, does every broker that ever uses that carrier ever again need to figure that out? Right. I have so many clients that have, let's even go from 50 trucks on.
Yeah.
They change drivers all the time.
Mm-hmm.
If they have a driver that just needs to pick up the shipment and then they bring it back to their lot and someone else takes it the rest of the way.
Yeah. Bryan, I look at a lot of this stuff is there's a lot of gray area, and what I want, and again, maybe I'm naive. All right. I will say this. I want accountability. All right. I look at it as we look at the DOT, the FMCSA, they're very much on a media press tour right now of getting out there, getting in front of the industry and doing everything. But then it's like, I kind of see on the flip side, they're kind of like, well, hey, we're in charge, but we're also not in charge. Like, this is on you guys to figure it all out. But if we were in violation of those rules, we would be put out of service. Right. So it's like, I'm seeing just a complete punt on accountability, and then an even bigger gray area and a bigger lack of direction, to where it's like, how do we even operate? Right. Because it's like, if we're following these specific guidelines that are out there, but then when it's not advantageous to do that, now all of a sudden it's like, oh, that's not our fault. You guys should have known that. Well, it's like, how do we operate? Is this going to embark upon just the massive Wild West that would be, and everybody's just pointing in a different direction. And is that in turn, that message going to cause more chaos and more fatalities on the roadway, because now everybody can just point the finger in a different direction and say that's not our problem?
So let me go back to the question that you asked that I believe I failed to answer. What changes, right? How is this different? I would argue, the Supreme Court asked, hey, in those jurisdictions, and this goes, I think, to the fundamental misunderstanding of the Supreme Court justices have on how brokers work and operate, is they said, well, how come the brokers in those jurisdictions haven't changed? And if you think about that question, well, you're assuming that the brokers in those jurisdictions in where they found liability on brokers only work in those jurisdictions. That's not the case. That every broker across the country is generally sending trucks all across the country, right? They're contracted with carriers to move goods all across the country. And for a time, they're probably holding their breath when they're in those jurisdictions. Okay, they made it out. Now we're going to be in a more friendly jurisdiction in the event of an accident. And so what they asked, well, haven't those companies made strides or changed their processes? And the counsel said, well, no, Your Honor, because they're kind of waiting on this, because even lower courts within those jurisdictions have disagreed with those courts.
Yeah.
And so they've essentially been waiting for you guys to hear this for years and years and years. And they were like, I can't believe they haven't changed their ways. Well, because there's no clear indication as to what they're supposed to do. And so here's where the Supreme Court opinion will matter. With every broker liability case where they find liability, attorneys have been able to pick specific lines of language, of of code, and then incorporate that into various contracts, various carrier selection policies. And by the way, I'll get to carrier selection policies here shortly, because whatever you establish as your carrier selection policy, stay to it. Be there, hold it, maintain it. Do not vary from it, because that the one time you vary from it, that's when it's going to be an issue. And they'll say, well, you clearly cared more about profits over safety. But if the Supreme Court comes out and provides, let's say they say 4 things. They say, well, based on this, the lower court, clearly C.H. Robinson ignored this, and this. I can tell you that every single person, and what I would say to my clients is every single person is going to run back to their carrier network and say, hey, find me all the carriers that have this, and this, or any combination of any of those 4 things. And they are going to do not load every one of those carriers.
Yeah.
And so we have a potential, right now I think everybody is applauding the government for cracking down on non-domiciled CDLs, on those that, don't have licensing, those that are, chameleon, like they're taking steps to, and it's reducing capacity. This Supreme Court case, we're focused on brokers, yes, but they hinted at it, right? It doesn't say that, this carrier can't be used, or that no broker can ever use this, because that's essentially a death sentence. And if the way the Supreme Court brought up shippers over and over, shippers, be on notice, because you're going to be subject to the same thing, whatever they decide, because they clearly had you in their minds. Mm-hmm. And so if you sit here and say, these are the 4 things, well, if no shipper's going to hire you and no broker's going to hire you, how on earth are you going to move forward? And does that actually exacerbate the chameleon carrier situation?
Yeah.
Because now all of a sudden they're going to say, well, I thought I was doing pretty good. I have these 4 things. I didn't think those were bad, right? I'm not out of service. I don't have a conditional safety rating, but maybe I hit these 4, 3 safe stat or basic scores, and my safe stat percentage, or not safe stat, geez, they're going way back, but my out of service order percentage is this for vehicles. And you hit those criteria, and I guarantee you, all of the carrier selection software, right? Your carrier assures up. I said it. I said I wasn't going to say it.
That's all good, man. You mentioned, I believe in the First Amendment, bro. Say whatever you want.
All right. So, but you have those platforms. I imagine they're immediately going to say, hey, and what's funny is the government said, pronounce the carrier's name, Caribe. And I was like, I've never heard.
I think it's Caribe.
He said Caribe, which I was like, wow, that is interesting. So anyways, however it's supposed to be pronounced, they don't exist anymore, so we can call them mud if we'd like to.
Right.
But they're going to probably have within the carrier selection, hey, to comply with these 4 things, these are all the carriers that would violate, the Montgomery case.
Yeah.
And that's going to be pretty significant. And if you hit those, all of a sudden, there's carriers that will be blacklisted depending on which justice writes the opinion and which things and how direct and in-depth they want to make this opinion. So I think this has the potential to have a catastrophic impact on capacity.
What do you think? And again, I'm not blaming any vetting software. I want to be abundantly clear here.
Yep.
I'm not blaming anybody for allowing anything, but is that the next iteration of lawsuits, right? If we're looking ahead, is then a C.H. Robinson or a broker or a carrier going to start suing some of these vetting software companies that are out there saying your data is making it impossible for me to work, or these brokers are going to go, or, a shipper too, because I'm sure there's shippers who are using them who set up direct carriers. The shippers are going to start going after these vetting softwares and say, we set them up based on the data you provided us. Do you see that happening? Or is that kind of like a way out of left field stretch?
So I think that's at a left field stretch because it is not, and obviously they have certain, hey, the recommendations or guidelines or things, but a lot of times they're giving you all the materials and they're saying bake a cake.
Mm-hmm.
You can put in whatever the heck, ingredients you want. And it may come out like, I don't know if you ever watched the show Nailed It. My family loves Nailed It. Regular people make, designer cakes and they look terrible. Some people's cakes are going to be terrible.
Yeah.
Others are going to have the right, mix of ingredients to hopefully limit and reduce frequency of incidents. But they kind of leave it up to you. And even if they do have recommendations, they're just passing information along, right? They're not the ones that are ultimately deciding or pushing anybody on you. And the other reason why I say I don't think so is simply based on the fact that it's not like they are the hoarders of this information. Right now, AI is it's so prevalent, right? Our firm uses it, everybody's using it, right? To make sure that we become more efficient and provide counsel and guidance to our clients as best as possible.
Yeah.
But if you're a broker, the plaintiff counsel, again, in our improv group, yeah, but you had access to ChatGPT. Did you even ask them? And ChatGPT will come up and say, oh, here's all the safe stats. So whether you're getting it from somebody or not, they're going to say, well, you had access to information and everybody has free access to this. You could have just asked the question. Why didn't you?
Yeah.
So
no.
Go ahead.
Yeah, I know. I say that. I figured you were going to say that, Bryan, right? But it's like, I think a lot of people want to blame others for their shortcomings. And it's like them looking internally to their operations, their SOPs. What did we do to expose ourselves to this? They're going to blame everybody else to that. So, it's like I'm on social media just as much as the next individual. I know there's a lot of people out there who love to blame software providers for why their business is failing, right? It's always somebody else. And I think like we're just at a point in time where I think rest assured, like moving forward, all of the carriers and brokers that are out there legitimately operating, right? Like I think it's going to get worse before it gets better here, Bryan. I think these next couple of years are going to be very trying for the industry, if I'm being completely honest, not trying to fearmonger. But I think the ones who take all of this seriously and they're like, they're operating at a high standard. They're not taking that last minute fall off load and being like, hey, we probably shouldn't book this guy, but fuck it, let's roll the dice. You remove a lot of that. I think after we get through this cloudy area, there's going to be an industry and a market that is going to be highly beneficial for the quality operators that are out there. I think that the cream is actually going to rise to the top.
Well, let me jump in here, because I think the Supreme Court did a terrible job, and I don't think there was adequate pushback. The Supreme Court, when the government's counsel came out and said, if we do this, then we're going to be left to the large companies who can pay for all these extra technology things. They equated size to safety. And I don't think there was an adequate pushback. So when you're saying that the best will rise to the top, I am concerned that we are giving the benefit of the doubt to the larger carriers. Now, I have a bunch of clients that are large carriers that are fabulous. I mean, they win safety award after safety award. They are wonderful. And if I could clone them and put them in every company, I would feel wonderful. But just because you're small and don't have all of the technology doesn't mean that you're unsafe or less safe, right?
Yeah.
And so I'm concerned that somebody hits some of these markers, or they if there's a language in this document, because they talked about the large carriers, your FedEx, your UPSs, they talked about these without reference to truckload or LTL or parcel, or they didn't mention any of that. How, well, we're not talking about those types of cases, because thank God, because could you imagine a mail carrier gets in an accident and the plaintiff's attorney is sitting there in the wreckage, right, thumbing through all the letters, be like, I'm going to sue every single one of these people that sent a letter that's on this truck. So I want to make sure that we understand that we can't come up with a system that just dumps on small carriers, because that's where the brokers live. In addition, all these large carriers, they already have direct contracts. You think FedEx, UPS, you think all these companies are going out and getting brokered loads from, some mid-sized brokerage? They're not.
Correct.
They don't do that. And so to think that, oh, well, you can just all use the large carriers. You can't. Because then now brokers are going to essentially go away, and there will only be large brokers left.
Yeah. It's a lot more concerning than I think enough people are. Maybe it's just because the attention economy is 10 seconds or less, and they read a headline and they formulate their entire opinion on it, Bryan. They don't actually pay attention to it. I'm actually kind of shocked at the amount of silence from the brokerage community out there about how this could really fundamentally change how we even operate as brokers, depending on how this shakes out, right? Like, I'll come out and say it. I'm sure an opinion can be bought on the Supreme Court, right? So you never know what's going to actually come out of politics here. And
I'm not, no comment, right?
But all I'm saying ultimately, though, Bryan, is I think a lot more people need to pay attention to what is going on. But ultimately, this is just going to be another domino that you're going to be faced with in this industry. So it's like, okay, and how are we going to improve? How are we going to stay in business? How are we going to service our customers? Because this isn't the first time that a big time thing could fundamentally change how we operate, right? And it's not going to be the last time. There is constantly going to be things out here that are going to come up in business where it's like you're going to have to roll with the punches ultimately. But I think, like, no matter what, you got to look at, like, internally, how can you navigate through these uncertain times, or what the potential fallout could be of this to stay in business, right? Because, like, I got a family to feed. I know you got a family to feed, Bryan, and I'm going to find a way to make it work no matter what.
Well, Chris, let me say it this way. If it, based on where the questions were going toward the end of the oral arguments, right now, most of my clients request a certificate of insurance, certificate of authority, right? And then your certificate of insurance, certificate of authority, and then a copy of the contract, right? Yeah. Those are generally the things that you get. And then if there's any type of factoring, you'll get that on the invoice. Well, what happens if now, in addition to that's the setup, right? And then you have automatic checks. So you really only need that on the onset. Well, on a shipment by shipment basis, right? You're following up on your freight, your load tracking software, right? Your 4 Points, MacroPoint, Trucker Tools, right? You're going out there and identifying, hey, I don't see that you're actively tracking yet, right? So you're following up on that. How hard is it to get that information? Add to it, well, now I need your DQ files, your vehicle maintenance records. I need a copy of your independent contractor agreement. What are the chances that that carrier is going to be like, okay, I'm sitting at a truck stop, I'm doing everything on my phone because you guys have made it so easy for me, right? The whole point is I am not interrupting commerce.
Yeah.
I'm not making it difficult for interstate commerce. I'm going through all these things. I sign the packet through, whatever software that you use. Here, I upload my files. Here we go. You're telling me I have to get my DQ files, my vehicle maintenance records? Well, I just hired somebody. So now I need to send you that. Am I having to start doing this the same way with insurance? And let me tell you this, what a lot of brokers don't understand is that generally when there's a scheduled autos policy, so if you or a scheduled driver's policy, either one, if you have 20 or less trucks, typically you're thrown into one or both of those categories.
Yeah.
And so you have 30 days to update the insurance company. So for a number of days, there's a lot of times drivers that are out there on the road that aren't technically scheduled, but they're not in violation of the insurance because you have 30 days to add them.
Yeah.
If they can't get their insurance company information, one party, do you think that they're getting all of the brokers every time there's a driver change? Do you know how much turnover there is? They have to start sending all this information, new information, every single load. That will slow down commerce so much, because not only now do you have somebody, not only does the carrier have to now provide this information, you're going to have brokers that are saying, I need this information. And for the next few years, right, you're going to have the same thing with, Four Kites and Macro Point when they came onto the scene. Nobody else is asking me to do this. You want to get onto my ELD? No. Well, now we're just adding another thing that we have to require, but also we get it. It's not like a COI where you can just look or the system automatically updates it and identifies what you've passed over. Now all of a sudden you got to go through all this other stuff. And going back to the software companies, this is where probably the software companies will start being able to charge you even more.
I completely agree, Bryan. And I also hear it as this could be a massive business opportunity for somebody to do this and have real-time reporting on all of that. And, again, like I think no matter what, there's going to be an opportunity that comes with this. And as I always, Bryan, I appreciate your time today. And I mean, at this point, you kind of don't have a choice, man. I'm going to have you back on. I love talking to you, man, because you just don't sugarcoat anything. Like you're out there spitting the truth. And this is just information that people need to hear. But how does anybody reach out to you though? If they need an attorney, if they need to talk to somebody, man, how do they reach out to you guys?
Sure. So my email address is bnelson, first letter of my first name and last name, at Taylor, TAYLOR, law, LAWPL, that's a Peter Libra.com. So bnelson at taylorlawpl.com, or find me on LinkedIn. I know there's a lot of guys in transportation, bald with a beard, but Bryan Nelson, I'm out of St. Pete. So reach out anytime. And then any of the attorneys in our firm will be able to help. And I do recommend immediately there will probably be changes to your carrier selection policies and your broker carrier agreements following this the decision that comes out. So make sure you have it updated. Talk to an attorney. Listen, I feel the attorneys right now feel a lot like doctors, where they come in and say, Dr. Google. I talked to Dr. Google before I talk to you. Educated clients are our favorite. So if you come with ideas, having researched it online, having used any of the AI platforms to kind of get you an understanding, it's a really good way to have a good discussion and a starting point. So that way we're not telling you things you don't already know, but we're also hopefully, like you said, we're saying it in a way that's not like, we're not ChatGPT here. We're not going to say that's a really great idea, let's do it this way. No, we're going to say, hey, listen, I don't recommend that.
Yeah, no, man, I love it. Bryan, thank you so much for your time. If you guys can't find Bryan or his law firm out there, hit me up. I will gladly put you guys in contact with them. But that is going to be it for today, ladies and gentlemen. As always, if you got value in what you heard and you're not subscribed, subscribe to the show, you guys. And if you're feeling ambitious, rank that show on iTunes and Spotify, because if you see value, your network's going to see it as well. I appreciate you guys. I love you guys. And we'll be talking to you soon.
Came back with a bang, window down, yelling out money, anything. Ayy, ooh, got the foot on the gas, pedal to the metal when I'm getting to the back. Ayy.